Hi, Mackey's back in town. Here to tell you more about the Chicago Dojo Wars, Count Dante, and the like. I thought this is the third video, and I'm actually kind of working out of order. Consider me the Quentin Tarantino of martial arts commentary, okay, because I'm playing with time shifting here. The first video, I told you what my broad goals were, and the second one was actually a description of the school that Count Dante chose to make a attack, which backfired drastically, and was actually kind of like the heartland of the Chicago Dojo Wars. They picked on a lot of schools, and some schools they beat up, you know. But I told you last time they came to mine, and it was a 1, 2, 3. They were gone. Oh, look, I can see my favorite painting. I'm sorry, but there's 2 favorite paintings. Just take a look. Wait, see if I can get them. There they are. See, that's a Rene Magritte. That's actually his wife. And this I got, believe it or not, at a resale shop. So see, besides being a 65-year-old ex-martial artist, I'm also a guy with culture. So anyway, let's continue. Today I want to talk about the W.K.F, the World Karate Federation. And the reason that is that's really where Count Dante got started, okay? I'm going to try to summarize the very beginning and then get into the actual organization a little bit, because that school, which was a chain, a cheap, cheesy chain of schools, was what eventually evolved into the Black Dragon Society, of which Count Dante was the leader of. So let's go here. I got to go back in my mental attitude here for a minute and draw a video here in my head. Okay. Again, my dad was a storyteller. I'm sorry, so am I. So let's start with the story. I can't remember the year again. It must be around 68, 67 maybe, 68. I don't know. But I wasn't driving yet. I know that. So it was like before I was 16. And I was in a shopping center in Niles, Illinois, and I was there with my mom. She drove. Like I said, I wasn't old enough to drive. We were going shopping together. I'm an only child. Yeah, I'm a mama's boy too. And so while we were walking around, all of a sudden I noticed there's this karate school. And as I've said many times before, at that time, there were not a lot of schools. There were some popping up that were run by mostly Americans. And this was an example of it, because prior to that, they were all Asian-backed, really. Except for a movement on the south side of Chicago led by the infamous Jim Jones, who I think has a rather... he looks very honorable on the surface, but I think he's got a tethered reputation. But anyway, because Count Dante was friends with him as well. And that's how he got kind of legitimized in Chicago after he left Bob Trios as I think in Texas maybe, I don't know. But Bob Trios, who had founded some American Karate Federation thing, was one of the first guys, besides the Asians, to bring martial arts, probably after the war sometime, to America. So Bob Trios trains Count Dante. Count Dante leaves, and he comes to Chicago. I think there was supposed to be some kind of franchise agreement. I don't know if there ever was or not. I mean, I'm being honest. I'm not, throwing stones. But my mom and I are walking in the shopping center, and there's this place. It's called the W.K.F, the World Karate Federation. And right off the bat, it's cheesy. Because back then, maybe you'd see a guy wearing a black uniform, occasionally. But, like, white was where it's at. I'm sorry, I don't mean anything racial by that, but I mean, white uniforms were where it's at. And occasionally guys would wear black ones, but never would you see somebody in a navy blue one. And one that occasionally you'd hear about places that used, instead of black belts, they'd use red belts. But it was so rare, and this place is using red belts instead of black belts. So it's very obvious that they're trying to identify themselves as autonomous from the existing karate community, Well, and I watched several classes because my mom used to go shopping there, and I'd go with her, and she'd go do her shopping, and I'd go watch a class. And I mean, it was cheesy. I mean, it was really cheesy. Like he'd get the high-ranking people to give demonstrations to the low-ranking people, but yet the demonstrations were so choreographed that I'm sorry, but it was worse than a Bruce Lee movie, if you catch my drift. Yes, I'm a little bit of a cynic. Okay, just hang in there with me, okay? I do make some sense. And so it was a very cheesy place. But at the same time, this school was owned or strongly affiliated with Count Dante. I believe he actually owned it, but was going under the name at the time, John Keane, who was actually a hairdresser also and an expert beard trimmer. Oh, my God, you should see that devil beard he's got. I mean, look, I have a beard. I know what a pain in the neck it is to groom it. Can you imagine what that guy used to have to go through every morning to think he looked good or tough or something? That tells you something right there. That's a biopsy of who John Keane is. But anyway, so John Keane, while he's the head of this World Karate Federation, he starts to sponsor tournaments. Now, my instructor was not big on tournaments. He was very traditional. So he wasn't big on anybody entering any tournaments because he didn't trust guys like John Keane who were starting to throw these big tournaments. And of course, what they were based on was the fact that they were going to go full contact. And that, of course, became a big issue in the martial arts field for many, many years because it evolved into wearing boxing gloves, and then it evolved into wearing pads on the feet, and then it evolved into wearing chest protectors, and then it evolved into into Muay Thai. I mean, even though Muay Thai had been around for a while, it became more noticeable then, and then came, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and then came, the UFC, which I think it's gone through so many mutations by now. It's not really martial arts, as I said before. I think it's fighting. It's tough ass fighting, but it's not martial arts. It lacks humility and pride and a lot of things that the martial arts are just as much a part of as the violent aspect of it. So anyhow, Count Dante starts these tournaments, and I would go as a spectator because I really wasn't allowed to participate at all. And I don't know that I would have anyway because I knew it was with this W.K.F. thing that I'd seen in the shopping center, and it looked hokey. And it was hokey. I mean, like the free sparring competition, yes, it was full contact, but it looked like a wrestling match. I mean, there were guys from the same school, but different locations that were fighting each other, and it looked put together. They did these fancy aerial things that belong in like a Hong Kong production kung fu movie. You know what I mean? Where you do like 20 flips in a row and then, paralyze a guy or something. I mean, that's the kind of stuff they were doing. They also, I remember one time, I went to many of them. They brought a bull one time they were going to kill or something, and I left. Masoyama only did that 4 years before in the Kyokushin Kaikan, who kind of specialize in breaking technique. But anyhow, I mean, can you believe this is coming from a 65-year-old guy? At least I don't have Alzheimer's. I mean, I think this is fairly scholarly if you can follow my affect. Anyway, pat on the back. Okay. So, anyhow, so he started these tournaments, and like I said, they were based on full contact, and there was a whole bunch of controversy about them. And they were held in this really hokey place that went on later to be a rock palace. It was called the Chicago Coliseum, and it was where, there used to be basketball games and stuff, and it was a fire trap, and it was dirty and smelly. And it was like going to a circus, and yet everybody walked around with uniforms. And of course, they had these breaking techniques. Now I have to veer off just for a second. But breaking technique is probably one of the biggest farces I've ever seen in my life, just based on physics. And if any of you watching this know what I mean, then you know that there's trickery in. Now, I'm not saying there's not power involved, but there's trickery because there's spaces put between the various ice blocks or cinder blocks or whatever, but never are they stacked directly on top. So what happens is you break the first one and it creates a domino effect, and it breaks all the other ones. That's why you'll notice that all of them will break before the guy's hand goes through them, if it even does. So breaking technique in itself, you're taught to, like, pull the brick away from the supporting brick a fraction of an inch before you hit it. Well, you got to hit it real hard, but what breaks it is the brick breaking against the stone, not your hand going through the brick. Okay, so I'm only going off into that because, one, it's something that I think is a lot of bullshit, except maybe what I saw Masoyama do a long time ago, which was break the neck of a beer bottle that was maybe 2/3 full, and he just gave it a knife hand sideways. It was standing up, and he snapped the top of it off without tipping the rest of the bottle off. That was quite amazing, but, there's a lot of magic, too, that's amazing, so I don't really know. But anyway, these tournaments were blocked by city ordinances because they started to involve bringing animals in, and I could get rather nasty, but they were at least killing them, or trying to, or do something with them. It was ridiculous, and that all evolved out of this thing called the World Karate Federation, W.K.F. It was John Keane's first place, and I think it was before he called himself Count Dante even. So that wraps up this one for today. Next time, I'm going to start to explain the Black Dragon Society and then go into the Dojo War itself. Okay? Thank you again, and one more time, namaste.